In 1952, America's most glamorous train climbed into the Sierra Nevada, carrying 226 passengers, champagne in hand, confident that nothing could stop them. Then hurricane-force winds buried the entire 15-car streamliner in snow so deep and so dense, it lifted the engines right off the rails. For 3 days, the passengers waited in freezing blackness, trapped between running out of oxygen or freezing to death. Every rescue attempt failed. Only a machine built before the Titanic could claw a path through what had become a mass grave of ice. What happened on Donner Pass turned luxury into a desperate fight for survival, and the solution became legend. The city of San Francisco was more than a train. It was a traveling hotel, a rolling nightclub, a floating palace on rails. 15 cars stretched nearly a quarter mile, painted in shining yellow and silver, gliding west from Chicago toward the Pacific. Inside, thick carpets muffled footsteps. Glass chandeliers trembled gently with every curve. Club cars hummed with laughter and the clink of glasses. Waiters in crisp uniforms poured champagne and set down plates of prime rib as the snow-capped Sierra Nevada flashed by the windows. This was the golden age of American rail travel, and the city of San Francisco was its crown jewel. Passengers settled into wide leather armchairs, watching the world blur past in a haze of comfort and confidence. Some were businessmen chasing deals between cities. Others were families, their children pressed to the glass, counting pine trees. There were soldiers on leave, a few politicians, and a scattering of society women in fur collars, their luggage stacked high with hat boxes and trunks. The train's crew moved like clockwork. Porters made beds with pressed sheets in the Pullman sleepers. Stewards took dinner reservations and called out the menu: oysters Rockefeller, roast duck, baked Alaska. In the observation car, a jazz record spun softly while the sun dipped behind the mountains. The only worry was whether the porter would bring another round before the next tunnel. Southern Pacific's pride ran deeper than the paint. This was a $2 million streamliner, built for speed and luxury, pulled by 4 diesel locomotives that could hit 110 miles per hour on the flats. The company boasted that no storm could stop them, not with modern engineering and a schedule that crossed the continent in under 40 hours. The engineers up front trusted their machines. The passengers trusted the railroad. Even as the first flakes of snow drifted down outside, no one doubted they would glide over the Sierra the way they always had. But as the train climbed higher, the landscape changed. Pines thickened along the tracks. The sky, so blue at the station, turned heavy and gray. Still, inside the dining car, the mood was bright. Toasts were raised to new beginnings, anniversaries, and safe arrivals. The world outside was winter, but inside, the city of San Francisco felt untouchable. A cocoon of warmth, light, and certainty, pushing west into the mountains as if nothing could ever go wrong. The first sign of trouble came as the train rounded a blind curve near Yuba Pass. The wind pressed against the cars with a force that rattled glass and sent snow swirling in sheets past the headlight. Outside, the blizzard was no longer just a backdrop, it was a wall moving sideways at nearly 100 miles per hour. In less than an hour, drifts had piled 8, 10, even 12 feet deep across the rails. The snow was not light or powdery. Driven by the wind, it packed itself into slabs as hard as concrete, each gust welding new layers onto the barricade. Up front, engineer Tom Sapinor watched the signals vanish behind a curtain of white. The locomotive's diesel engine strained as he throttled forward, but the wheels found no grip. Sapinor threw the controls into reverse, hoping to rock the train free. The cars groaned and shuddered, but the snow underneath refused to give. Every attempt to move forward or back only dug the wheels deeper until the frame itself began to lift. 200 tons of steel and glass beached on a frozen reef. Sapinor tried again, shifting the weight from engine to engine, easing the throttle, coaxing the train as if it were a living thing. Nothing worked. The snow, packed by wind and compressed by the train's own weight, formed a cradle that lifted the entire consist off the rails. The wheels spun uselessly in midair, flinging ice but gaining nothing. Within minutes, the city of San Francisco was no longer a train. It was a stranded artifact, frozen in place by physics and weather. The storm outside raged without pause. Gusts battered the sides of the cars, making the walls vibrate like drumheads. The drifts grew higher, swallowing the steps, then the lower windows, then the doors. Snow crept into every gap, filling vents and packing itself into the undercarriage. Sapinor radioed back to the conductor. The engines were running, but the train was going nowhere. Inside, the mood shifted. The luxury and confidence of the journey gave way to a metallic tension. Passengers glanced at the windows, now glazed with frost, and began to realize that the outside world was no longer just scenery. The train's mechanical heart kept humming, but the sense of control had vanished. Every attempt to break free only confirmed the truth. The city of San Francisco was trapped, not by a simple delay, but by the raw, indifferent force of a Sierra blizzard. Out here, in the shadow of Donner Pass, the mountain had the final say. Dr. Walter Rohel moved down the narrow aisle, his breath clouding in the cold. He paused at a woman slumped in her seat, her face pale, eyes unfocused. 2 children nearby complained of splitting headaches. The air inside the Pullman car had turned sour, tinged with an oily, metallic smell. It wasn't just the cold creeping in, something else was seeping through the walls. The engines, still idling beneath tons of snow, were supposed to be their lifeline. But as the drifts climbed higher, they choked off the vents and muffled the exhaust. Diesel fumes, colorless and deadly, began to back up into the cars. Passengers grew dizzy and nauseous. Some staggered to the restrooms, confused. A railroad worker, checking on the sleeping cars, stumbled out, barely able to stand. Dr. Rohel recognized the symptoms: carbon monoxide poisoning. There was no time to debate. He ordered the engine shut down immediately, even as the temperature inside plunged. The decision landed like a sentence. The last hum of machinery faded, replaced by silence and the distant howl of the wind. Within minutes, the warmth bled from the air. Frost crept across the glass. People wrapped themselves in whatever they could find, curtains torn from brass rods, tablecloths swiped from the dining car. In the kitchen, the staff broke up wooden chairs and fed them to the stove, coaxing a little heat for coffee. The elegant compartments, mahogany panels and velvet seats became makeshift shelters against the dark. Rohel and the 5 army nurses moved through the train, checking pulses, counting breaths, urging people to stay awake. They herded the sick and frightened into 2 Pullman cars, where a portable propane heater offered a flicker of hope. The threat of poison had faded, but now the cold pressed in, relentless. Pipes froze, toilets backed up. The battery lights dimmed to orange, then to nothing. In the darkness, people huddled together, listening to the snow pile higher, waiting for a sound from the outside world. It was a choice between invisible poison and the certainty of freezing. For the first time, the passengers understood what it meant to be trapped in Donner Pass, not by hunger, but by breath and by cold. Curtains vanished from the windows, ripped down and wrapped around shivering bodies. The velvet that once framed mountain vistas became makeshift blankets, layered over shoulders and tucked around legs. Tablecloths disappeared from the dining car, pressed into service as scarves and hoods. Even the thick napkins, monogrammed with the Southern Pacific logo, found new life stuffed into coat sleeves and shoes to block the drafts. In the kitchen, the staff pried apart wooden chairs and broke up crates, feeding splintered mahogany into the stove. The fire was weak, the coffee thin, but the ritual of warmth mattered more than the taste. Passengers lined up with tin cups, hands shaking, grateful for any heat that could be coaxed from the dwindling pile of kindling. The Pullman compartments, once private sanctuaries, filled with strangers pressed shoulder to shoulder. People huddled in silence, breath fogging in the cold air. Some tried to keep spirits up, singing snatches of old songs, telling stories about summers in California or childhood winters in Chicago. But the darkness swallowed most conversation. The battery lights flickered, then died, leaving only the faint orange glow from the kitchen fire and the dim blue of snow pressing against the glass. It was impossible to tell night from day. Dr. Rohel and the army nurses moved from car to car, checking on the elderly and the sick. They handed out aspirin, urged people to keep moving, to stamp their feet and rub their hands. Frost began to creep across the inside of the windows. Pipes froze solid. Toilets overflowed. The air grew stale, heavy with the scent of sweat, coffee, and fear. Some passengers wept quietly. Others sat rigid, staring into the dark, counting the hours. Food was rationed. The kitchen staff made thin soup from whatever was left, canned beans, crackers, bits of ham. Children were given the last of the milk. Adults chewed on cold bread, careful not to complain. Every sound outside, the groan of wind, the shifting of snow, felt like a threat. The train was silent except for the occasional cough or the clatter of a pot in the galley. The sense of privilege had vanished. What remained was a kind of stubborn hope, a refusal to give in, even as the cold pressed in from every side. In the heart of the Sierra, the city of San Francisco was no longer a palace. It was a lifeboat, and everyone on board was just trying to hold on until the mountain let them go. In the deep snows of the Sierra, ordinary plows were as useless as spoons in a quarry. Standard wedge plows, the kind that cleared tracks across most of America, relied on brute force, slamming into drifts and pushing snow aside. That worked as long as the snow had somewhere to go. But when the drifts rose 15, even 20 feet high, and packed themselves into walls as dense as concrete, the wedge simply jammed. The snow did not budge. It just squeezed tighter, locking the steel in place. The city of San Francisco was trapped behind a barricade that no modern diesel could break. The only hope lay in a machine from another era, the Rotary Snowplow. Born in 1869, it looked nothing like the streamlined engines it was sent to rescue. Up front was a steel disc 8 feet across, lined with curved blades like the mouth of some prehistoric beast. Powered by a steam engine, the cutterhead spun at up to 150 revolutions per minute. Instead of pushing snow, it chewed through it. The spinning blades sliced the drifts into powder, then hurled the pulverized snow through a chute, blasting it 100 feet off the tracks. Each pass carved a tunnel wide enough for a train, no matter how deep the snow. Inside the rotary cab, the crew worked surrounded by heat, steam, and the constant vibration of the cutterhead. They controlled the throttle and the gears with a careful hand, knowing that one mistake could be fatal. If the blade struck a hidden rock or a buried tree, the impact could shatter the steel disc, turning it into shrapnel. Riding a rotary was like sitting on a loaded cannon. Every mile was a gamble, but nothing else could break the mountain's grip. The rotary's violence was the only answer to the Sierra's silence. Against the frozen barricade, it was the last machine standing between survival and disaster. Rotary Snowplow number 7222 crouched at the base of the mountain, steam hissing from every joint, its cutterhead spinning into a blur of steel teeth. Pushed by the mallet locomotive, the rotary crawled forward at a walking pace, 1 mile per hour, sometimes less. Every foot was a battle. The engine's roar vanished under the avalanche of grinding, the shriek of steel on ice echoing through the timber. Snow packed as hard as granite exploded into powder and shot from the chute in white geysers, arcing 100 feet above the buried tracks. Inside the cab, engineer Roland Raymond braced himself against the vibration. The cab rattled like a tin can in a hailstorm. Each time the blades hit a hidden branch or a chunk of rock, the whole machine shuddered, threatening to shake itself apart. The men knew the risks. If the cutterhead jammed or shattered, the rotary could turn into a bomb. Still, they leaned into the controls, eyes stinging from steam and sweat, carving a tunnel through what looked like the end of the world. Progress came in fits and starts. Sometimes the snow swallowed the plow to its roof, and the crew had to dig it out by hand. Other times the machine lurched forward, only to stall as the weight of the next drift pressed against the blades. For hours, the rotary inched up the pass, carving a path where no other machine could go. Then disaster struck. A snowslide thundered down from the ridge. slamming into the Rotary and its crew. The cab vanished under tons of ice. When the snow settled, Engineer Raymond was gone, buried alive, the first and only fatality of the rescue. The crew dug with bare hands, but the mountain kept its grip. The remaining Rotaries pressed on, each mile a test of nerve and iron. By the afternoon of January 16th, the cut-ahead finally punched through the last barricade. For the first time in 3 days, a beam of light sliced through the darkness inside the train. Passengers pressed their faces to the glass, watching the headlight flicker through the frost. The silence broke with a cheer. The mountain had been breached, not by speed, not by luxury, but by the grinding, relentless fury of steel. When winter buries the rails at Donner Pass, even today railroads depend on rotary snowplows, still powered by century-old designs, to carve a path through what high-tech engines cannot survive. Nature has not eased its grip, and our most advanced machines still yield to the old giants when the snow comes. In the battle between progress and the elements, the past is not obsolete, it is essential. What would you trust if the storm returned?